guys, welcome back to my channel. Finally, we have my top favorite books of 2020. I read 117 books in 2020 and I have narrowed down my top 10 books that I read. Actually, I think there's 11, but we're gonna call it top 10. I tried for the life of me to rank these and I couldn't do it. It was impossible. I love all of these books so much and I don't even know if I have like a one favorite out of all of them. But also I do want to say I have separated my romance books out of here. Like always, I do a separate best romance books of the year video, which should be coming within the next couple of days. So these are specifically the best non-romance books that I've read. I'm so excited to talk about these. The first one we have, I feel like if I really gun to my head, forced to pick one of these books that is my top favorite, it would probably be The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I am just obsessed with this book. I became obsessed with it when I read it and I'm still obsessed with it now. I feel like this is the one book that I've like really been pushing on people and wanting everyone to read. So this is a very whimsical, magical fantasy book about this guy named Linus who is a caseworker for the department in charge of magical youth, and basically his job is to go around to orphanages that house magical children and just make sure everything's going well. And he gets tasked with a very high-level case to go to this one particular orphanage that houses the very like top-tier dangerous magical children. So he goes there and he meets all of these very quirky, bizarre, strange, amazing kids, as well as the master of the orphanage. And this is just honestly the most happy book that I have ever read in my life. It is so joyful. It literally is like instant serotonin. I do not believe that you can read this book and not come out of it feeling just so happy and full of like warm feelings. I feel like this is the type of book that would appeal to a very wide array of people. I've also kind of compared this to like the vibes of a Pixar movie, because I feel like if this were made into like a movie or a TV show, it would be like a Pixar DreamWorks kind of vibe. So the next book is, I think, the only sequel in here, and that is Come Tumbling Down by Seanan McGuire. This is the 5th book in the Wayward Children series, and this is now like the 4th or 5th year that a Wayward Children's book showed up on my favorites list. I feel like that is something that is never going to change. I just love this series. It's my all-time favorite series, and I think that this might be my favorite book in the series so far. I don't know. I feel like every single new book that comes out, I decide that that's my favorite, which honestly is just a testament to how amazing the series is, that I think that each book progressively is getting even better. But this book in particular was a continuation of Jack and Jill's story, and we're following them back into their dark gothic world of the moors. So hold on, rewind. In case you're totally unfamiliar with this series, basically this series is following a bunch of children who have found their ways into magical worlds via doorways. So kind of like imagine like Narnia or Alice in Wonderland, those type of kids. And now they're back in the real world and struggling to readjust into normal societies. So they end up at this boarding school for children like them. So some of the books follow the kids at the boarding school and some of the books follow the kids in their magical worlds having their fun adventures. This book is in one of those magical worlds called the Moors, which is dark and gothic and kind of like Dracula and Frankenstein combined. And it is the conclusion to Jack and Jill's story, who are a pair of twin characters that we've been following throughout the series. And it's just so great. I love the series. So the next one is The Library of the Unwritten by AJ Hackwith. This is a book that I believe was my first 5-star of last year. I could be wrong. But when I read this book, I was obsessed with it. I did a whole reading vlog and I was like, this is my new all-time favorite book ever. Do I still feel like that? I don't know that it's my all-time favorite book ever, but I still really loved this book. So essentially we're following this library in hell. Any unfinished story that somebody writes ends up in this library in hell, and all the stories are being protected by the librarian. The reason why she has to protect them is because frequently the characters from those unfinished stories want to escape their story and go to Earth and find their author and make them finish the story. At the beginning of the book, that is exactly what happens. One of the heroes of an unfinished story escapes and wants his author to finish the story, so the librarian has to travel to Earth to bring him back, and while she's going there, she gets kind of caught in the crosshairs of this battle between angels and demons and the fight over this weapon called the Devil's Bible, which is a very dangerous book depending on whose hands it gets into. And so this book is just so much fun. It has like alternate worlds and angels and demons. One of the really cool aspects is that there are many different afterlives that you can travel to that are all connected with portals, and so the characters in this group are kind of like hopping through different afterlives to go on this quest. So one of the ones that they go to is Valhalla, and there's a really cool like battle that they have there. It has a really great cast of characters with like really crazy quirky people. The next book is probably another one that if I really had to choose like what are my top favorites out of this list, this next one would probably be up there, and that is The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss. Pretty much I would say all of the other books on this list were either 2020 releases or like new to me books. However, this book I've owned for like 4 or 5 years. And I never knew what it was about. I never really like looked into it. I don't even remember how I got it, but it is now an all-time favorite book. So basically this is a historical Victorian Gothic murder mystery type of story. We're following basically the daughters of classic Gothic characters. So the main character is the daughter of Dr. Jekyll. We also have the Bride of Frankenstein, daughter of Dr. Moreau. All of these girls in one way or another throughout the book come together because they discover this conspiracy that there is a group of men, scientists, who have been experimenting on women, and all of these girls have been the subjects of those experiments. And so they want to put a stop to it and take this society of scientists down. Honestly, like this book is just a love letter to those classic Gothic stories. If you are a fan of like Sherlock and Jane Eyre and Dracula, like all of those stories, there are crossovers in here. We've got Sherlock and Dr. Watson play like main characters in assisting the girls with their investigation. We've got Frankenstein. In the sequel, the second book, Dracula makes an appearance. It is just like a collection of all of these characters that is so much fun. But what I think is really great is that the 5 main girls, the 5 main characters, I think it could have been really easy for them to have been overshadowed by these like really big legendary characters, and they're not. They all have such a huge presence, and it's very clear that they are the main characters and they're not overshadowed by like Sherlock and Watson. And I just love this group of girls so much. The way that they're all so different but come together for this greater purpose in like taking down their fathers. And what's also really cool is that the books are actual books in the story that is being written by one of the main characters. She's writing like their adventures. So the book that we're reading is that book that she's writing. And so occasionally you'll have commentary from the other characters about the book. So it's very meta in like they're kind of cutting in like, that's not really what happened, that's not really what I said, and it just adds like so much character and personality to characters in the book, and it is a lot of fun. This book was so good, the sequel was so good. I cannot wait to read the 3rd and final book, but I'm a little bit nervous because I don't want it to be over. The next book is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. You guys, this book was amazing. I think that this is the most recent addition to this favorites list. This is just like one of the most fun fantasy books that I read last year. Essentially, this is a fantasy book that is inspired by civilizations of pre-Columbian America, and we're following 3 different characters. One of them is a siren pirate captain who is amazing. I loved her. Brilliant, beautiful. Then we're also following this guy who is blind, and he has been prophesized to be the vessel for a long dead god. And then the third point of view is a woman who has worked her way up in the religious ranks, and she is now the sun priest. This whole book is leading up to this prophesized celestial event where a dead god is going to return. This book was just so much fun. It honestly had something for everybody. It had pirate adventures, romance, crazy fight scenes, twists, political intrigue. Two of the main characters in this book are probably up there in like my top favorite characters ever. So the next book is our first repeat author, and that is Over the Woodward Wall by Deborah A. Baker, who is a pen name for Seanan McGuire. So this book is connected to her book Middle Game, which I have not yet read, but they don't need to be read. You don't have to read Middle Game to have read this, because this is just a fictional novel that exists within the world of Middle Game and is referred to a couple times from my knowledge. And so this is, honestly, I feel like this is another book in the Wayward Children's series. Like if you told me that this was a Wayward Children's book, I would believe you. It has the exact same vibe. But essentially this follows two kids who could not be more different. One of them is very like straight-laced, follows the rules, everything has to be perfect in the way that it is. And then the other kid is very just like wild and free and does whatever she wants. And one day they're walking to school and they discover a wall in the middle of the road. And both of them decide to climb that wall. And on the other side of the wall, they find themselves in this magical world. And I won't say too much about it because it is pretty short, but basically they find out that their only way home is to just follow the road. And while they're on it, they meet a bunch of really crazy people and animals and creatures and things. There's roadblocks, there's people trying to help them continue on the road, there's people trying to stop them and lure them to other places. There's evil queens and kings who are trying to trap them in the world forever. I really loved this. It was so much fun, and I really hope that this isn't like a one-time thing. I want more books in this series following these kids in this world, because the way that it ended, there's more. Like there's more of the story and I want more. And I guess comparing it to Wayward Children, I feel like I would say that this leans more whimsical magical, where like Wayward Children leads a little bit more like dark magical. But again, like if they were from the same series, I would not know the difference. The next book is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson, which was probably my most anticipated book of 2020, and thankfully, I ended up loving it. So this is a dark fantasy that takes place in this puritanical society, kind of a cult, and the leader of this society is called the Prophet, and basically his word is law. Everyone must do exactly what he says, and most of the women in this community end up becoming one of his wives. Outside of the community, there is this really dark, forbidden forest where previously there were a bunch of witches who were murdered in the forest, and now their spirits lurk there to get revenge. So the main character, her mother was supposed to be the Prophet's next wife, but she ended up having an affair with one of the men from the Outsiders. Because of that, the Prophet wanted them both dead. So she ended up running away into the forest and living there, and then months later coming back pregnant and dying in childbirth. So the main character has always felt this kind of lure to the dark forest, and like something from in there is calling her, and one day she accidentally finds herself in the forest and is confronted by the spirits of these witches, and she unknowingly unleashes their revenge curse upon the town. So now the town is going through a bunch of different plagues that are making people sick, killing people. She has to try to decide, like, does she want to just let this happen, let everyone suffer, because most of the people in this town have ostracized her whole life and been horrible to her, or does she want to try to save them, because there are still some good people in the village who are innocent. And I loved this. The combination of the cult mixed with this dark forest with witches on a vengeance and curses and plagues, it was just so great. There's one scene in particular towards the end that is one of the most iconic scenes I've ever read in my life. It was so good. The next two books are both by the same author. Other than Seanan McGuire, this is the only repeat author I have on this list, and that is Kay Ingram. So 2020 was the year that I fell in love with Kay Ingram. I read her debut book, The Wicker King, and I just fell in love with it so much. So basically this follows two friends, Jack and August, who are so codependent, so connected. One of them is like the outcast misfit and the other one is like the golden boy, the popular boy. But throughout the book, Jack starts to have hallucinations and he starts to not know what's real and what's not, and his mental state is really in turmoil. And a really cool aspect of the book is that as his mental state gets more and more chaotic and he doesn't know what's real and what's not, the pages of the book get darker and darker until they're completely black. And basically August is really trying to be there for him, trying to help him, trying to figure out what is going on. And throughout the course of the book, their intense friendship turns into love and a romantic relationship. And I just fell in love with this so much. The connection that these two boys have was on another level. This also features a polyamorous relationship because they do have a relationship together with a woman. I just fell in love with this. So then of course I had to read her second book, The Weight of the Stars, which is a sapphic book about these two girls who don't like each other, so it's kind of enemies to lovers, but they share this connection with space. So the main character, she desperately wants to be an astronaut. She loves space, but she comes from a very poor background. She lives in a trailer, and becoming an astronaut is like this far off dream that she has. And then the other character, her mother was part of this expedition that was basically a one-way trip that these astronauts took. They went up into space to travel and never came back. And so she has a very dark relationship with space because her mother basically abandoned her to go to space. And so these girls really come together because of their connection with space. And despite not liking each other at first, they end up falling in love. And this book is just so beautiful. The sapphic love is amazing. I feel like I really can't choose which one I like more because they both just spoke to me on completely different levels. But absolutely, if you have not read Kay Ingram yet, you need to. Her writing is beyond beautiful, and the connection that she builds between her characters is unlike anything that I've read. It's so beautiful, and I will now read literally anything that she writes. So the next book is Girl Serpentthorne by Melissa Bashados. This is a Persian-inspired fantasy that feels like a fairy tale. So basically the main character, she was cursed where her touch is poison, so anyone she touches dies. So she's lived her life very caged. She doesn't go out much. She travels in her palace through hidden passages, so she never has to come into contact with anybody. And one day she finds out that there is a demon being held prisoner in the dungeons who could be the only person to help her figure out how to undo this curse. And this book was everything that I wanted. This is like the princess being lured to the darkness, the princess like being stuck in the middle or stuck on the brink of good and evil and not really knowing which way to go and being tempted by both. This had some of my favorite romantic love interests, but this does have a sapphic romance in it, and I just loved this so much. And then the last book on this list is The First Sister by Lyndon A. Lewis. This is a sci-fi space opera. It takes place in a future world where humans have colonized Mars and Venus, and now Earth and Venus are in this long-standing war. And we're following three main characters. One of them is the first sister, who is essentially like the space version of The Handmaid's Tale. The sisters are an organization of women whose sole purpose is to comfort soldiers, and she is the first sister, which means she is the one who comforts the captain. Then we're following a soldier who has been given the assignment to find and assassinate their former partner. And this book was just like so wild, so crazy, so many twists and turns and plot twists that I did not see coming. This book also made me realize how much I love sci-fi because I had so much fun reading this book and I loved all these characters so much. It was definitely like a standout debut by this author. We also have a lot of queer representation. There's sapphic romances, a non-binary main character. I'm sure there's more that I'm just forgetting, but this was honestly so good and I cannot wait for the sequel. The sequel is probably one of my top most anticipated books of 2021. It's gonna be so good, especially because the way that this left off, I still feel my heart in my stomach. So here were all of my favorite books of 2020. Honestly, even though 2020 was kind of a terrible year for everybody, I read some truly amazing books and I'm just really excited to see what other amazing books I read in 2021. I feel like every single year I'm just getting better and better at knowing my own reading taste and choosing books that I'm just going to love. So thank you guys for watching and I will see you in my next video. Bye!